Welcome to the Imagine Better podcast. This week, your host, Mark Powers, is joined by Jacob Brown. They will discuss how failure is not the end, it is fuel. So sit back, watch, and enjoy.
Welcome to the official episode 1 of Imagine Better. Last week you saw we kicked it off with the inaugural with a good friend of ours, Terry Bean. This week, I've got this guy, Jacob Brown. Jacob, how you been, my friend?
I'm good, man. I couldn't be better.
Right.
How you guys doing? Thank you for tuning in. I'm excited to have the conversation today.
Yeah, me too. I told Jacob when we were grabbing coffee, I said, I'm a little nervous, this guy's an international speaker, he's an author, he's the real deal, but he's real. That's the thing. He's the real deal. And he's a family man, he's a successful entrepreneur. I'll have him share a little snippet of that journey with you. But today, everybody that knows Jacob knows fail forward.
Yeah.
Failure isn't the end, it's the fuel. And I stole that from, I think it was his LinkedIn or his website. So that's really today's topic. And let me hit pause for a second. Jacob, tell everybody a little bit more about you, and then let's dive in.
Yeah. So most of you guys know me as the Fail Forward Guy, or the hashtag Fail Forward Guy on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is kind of my platform. I'm on LinkedIn, TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube as well. But LinkedIn is the place that I try my best to engage, motivate, interact with as many people, and encourage as many people to fail forward, right?
Right.
I am no stranger to failure at all. I have failed a lot in my life. And one thing that I've learned is that the more I talk about my failures and express them and share them with people, the more I take back the shame and the guilt of my failures, right? I had a failed marriage. I had failed jobs. I had failed businesses, failed relationships, failed friendships, failed businesses, I failed out of college. I went to the NFL. I left 2 months early from Central Michigan to go train down in Miami, and I left Central with 9 credits short, man. Talk about a failure. I got cut from the NFL 3 months after I got there. I felt like a failure. But one thing that I've learned is if I take those learnings, if I take the progress that I made up until that point into the next project, the next phase, the next relationship, the next friendship, the next business, right? I can fail forward. So.
Yeah, no, I love that. I mean, I would bore everybody to death with the amount of failures I've had. I think they are taller than Mount Everest. And it's a challenge to climb that wall of failure. I was listening to one of Jacob's podcasts actually this morning on the way into the office here, the studio, and I love the fact, your analogy of when you're in football and you get tackled, you don't go back to the line of scrimmage. You begin where you got tackled and you fail that forward. And I love that when you said, when you in football, they teach you to move forward, fall forward. Mm-hmm. And so if you're on the 1 yard line, Jacob says, well, what do you do? If you fall forward, you have a touchdown.
Exactly.
So it's that analogy that really resonated with me with this topic this morning, the saying, we're all going to stumble. We're all going to have these challenges, and we can look at life as this heavy, complex machine. But that's okay, because we get to have an opportunity to learn from each of those experiences, as Jacob says, fail forward. And if you're doing anything worthwhile in life and 100%. You're pushing yourself, you're going to fail.
Absolutely. Do you want to give my next keynote?
I will. I'll be on the sideline being your cheerleader. How's that?
Absolutely.
I'll be your supporter over there. Cheers to Jacob Brown.
Man, you hit the nail right on the head. And I talk about that all the time. And to be quite honest, most of you know that I struggled with alcohol for about 15 years. I'm 2.5 years sober by the grace of God today.
Awesome. Congratulations.
And one thing that I learned in my sobriety as I'm going through therapy and speaking to different people, there have been people that have been sober for years, like 10, 20 years, and then they fail, they have that drink, and they kind of going back into, but the progress that they made up until that point isn't gone. Right? They still have those years of sobriety. They still have that knowledge, the progress, and that just because you failed doesn't mean you have to continue down that path. You can start back over, and you still have that progress, right? It's the same thing in our lives, guys. Like, most of the time we believe when we fail, when we lose a job, when we get laid off, which is happening right now, And my heart goes out to a lot of people that are struggling right now financially. A lot of people are being laid off right now. And it sucks, to be quite honest. It really does suck. But I want you to remember that the knowledge and the experience that you learned on that job, in that business, with your colleagues, whoever it might be, the network that you've grown can be used for the next phase of your life, right?
I love that.
There are seasons in our lives, right? And just like the seasons of Michigan, and for those that are in Michigan, you know what seasons are, right? And we're coming into spring, we're coming into summer, and we as Michiganders love this season, right?
Yeah,
but the season we just left sucks, right? Yeah. It was winter, it was cold, it was snowy, it was slippery outside, but everything died during that period of time, but things are coming back to life because there's a new season. And some of you guys might feel like you're in the season of winter, and some of you might feel like you failed because you were either laid off from your job or you didn't get the promotion or whatever it might be. But understand that everything happens in a season, right? And your season is coming if it hasn't yet.
I love it. In fact, now that Jacob mentions that, in the comments, give us an example of one of the greatest failures you've had and how you overcame that. That would be fun to kind of, read, and then maybe, what would be fun, Jacob, is for you to respond back to that with your expertise and knowledge and fail forward.
100%.
To encourage and inspire them to continue.
Yeah, and I'll just respond to you guys. I won't put all my failures because you probably won't have any room in the comments.
LinkedIn's going to be like, whoa, we limit this thing. So, I think, listening to your story, and we've known each other maybe 2 years now, something like that. I remember one time I asked Jacob to, in fact, I don't even think it's been 2 years. I think it's just been a little over a year, because last April was this April was the 1 year anniversary of me launching my book.
Yes.
Everything Sucks Some of the Time. And I asked Jacob to join me in Royal Oak for coffee. I had some questions, and I was nervous about some things, and wanted his input. Anyway, so we got together, and that's when you were also telling me that you were looking or getting ready to publish your first book.
Yes, yeah. So I'm still working on it.
Yeah.
And it's funny that you say that, 'cause I just left that same coffee shop this morning.
Did you really?
Yeah, I had a coaching meeting. One of my coaching clients and I met at Atomic Coffee, and as I was there, and no understanding I was coming to meet you, everything was playing back to itself, because that was actually the last time I had been there.
Yeah.
Was the last time you and I met.
Yeah.
But I, too, like you mentioned, right, a little bit of imposter syndrome, a little bit of fear, self-doubt. I've been trying to overcome the same thing when releasing my book.
Yeah.
Right? I had aspirations to launch my book last October. And here we are, almost in May.
I thought he was going to launch it 2 months after we met.
Oh my gosh, here we are, almost in May.
Put that motivation in you, Jacob.
I'm gonna have to reach out to you so you can take a look at my book, make sure everything's succinct, because you jumped right in with your book. Everything Sucks Some of the Time, and I have that book on my bookshelf.
Thank you.
And I absolutely love it, man. And
thank you.
I need the same push. So if you guys are following or you're watching, you don't send it in the comments. Push me, because I need to get my book out there and get over myself that it needs to be perfect, because everything doesn't need to be perfect.
No, and it's interesting because, again, when Jacob and I were talking this morning, I shared, I've been out of the kind of the front, behind the camera. I've been out of the scene for quite some time now, because I've been struggling with some of my own inner demons and dealing with that darkness and trying to figure it all out. And I'll tell you, through therapy and stuff like that, I go every Tuesday. I will never stop going.
I love it.
It's the most amazing, refreshing splash in the face of just like, hello.
Yes.
You are a beautiful, wonderful person.
Yes.
And you can do this. So I was sharing some of my issues. Like I was nervous that Jacob was coming here today. Here I know the guy, follow him everywhere on every social platform. And we're sitting here having coffee, and I'm basically shaking like this. I'm like, oh. And what did you call it? The
imposter syndrome.
Explain to everybody what that is, because he asked me if I felt like I had it, and I'll be honest, I didn't realize what it was. So now I realize I do have this.
Yeah. So if you've ever heard of imposter syndrome, to put it a bit more simpler, imposter syndrome is simply that tiny voice in the back of your head, right? We got good and evil, right? Imposter syndrome is that tiny voice in the back of your mind, in your head, that's telling you you're not good enough. You're not smart enough. You don't have enough education. There's no way someone like you that came from the city or the place and the family that you did deserves to be here, right?
Right.
At this table. And I feel like everyone, it doesn't matter who you are. And I've spoken to some of the highest powerful people in our space, right? And even I was in agency for 16, 17 years. And even people at the highest levels of agency or corporate America still struggle with imposter syndrome, of feeling self-doubt, of being unsure of if they're good enough to be in this place, to give that presentation, to make that keynote speech, or to even receive an award, right?
Right. Or ask for that promotion.
Or even ask for the promotion. Most people don't even believe they should even ask for the promotion, right? And it's that imposter syndrome, and a lot of us go through that self-doubt phase. And I'm here to tell you, if you're feeling this, if this is happening to you, I want you right now to get excited.
Yeah.
Get excited, because imposter syndrome, guys, only shows up just before something amazing is about to happen.
Yeah, and I'm telling you, it's like sitting here, after when we came back in, up to the studio here and we started talking, I started to kind of calm down. I was like, this is just my friend. I don't need to see him in my mind up on stage and doing all these awesome things, because he too was sharing that, it wasn't an easy just epiphany saying, oh, I need to be an international speaker.
Right.
I was in the agency space, as you heard. He has a family. He lost his job, and you talk about taking a leap of faith.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? But yet you had to have enough belief in yourself, from your family, from your wife, from your friends,
100%,
to be where you're at right now. And you're, honestly, I watch a lot of your stuff, almost all of it, and you're in the infancy, baby. You're just getting started.
Well, I appreciate
the
that.
global platform has yet to experience Jacob Brown.
I really appreciate that.
And I'm going to go on the record and predict by 2025, he will be known bigger than, you name the big motivational. I don't even like saying motivation. Terry Bean and I talked about this last week. To motivate is going to like a Tony Robbins. You come out of that with the emotional feeling of, I can do anything. That's, you just motivated me.
Yeah.
I don't like to see people just get motivated. I want to see them be activated.
Yes.
Don't motivate, activate.
Activate.
Because that's where you take it home with you. That's where you inject it in every aspect of your life.
Yeah.
And you feel it through your veins, right? And
Can I use this?
You can use it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're spot on, because I wherever I go, wherever they introduce me, I do let them know, hey, I would much rather be introduced as a transformational speaker.
Right.
Because I firmly believe motivation dies. Right?
100%.
Motivation lasts for a short period of time, but it dies unless you activate.
Activate.
Right? And once you activate and once you put those things into action, that's where the transformation happens.
Right.
Right? There is a period of time where motivation matters. Right? I tell a story about how, before the game, there are motivational speakers, right? They give that pregame speech.
Oh, yeah.
They get you pumped up, they get you motivated, right? But as soon as you get out there on the field and somebody smacks you in the mouth, that motivation's gone.
Yeah.
Right? Now you've got to rely on the discipline, you've got to rely on activation, you've got to rely on execution, right? And the more that you rely on those things instead of just the pump up before the game, that's when things start to transform.
Yeah.
Right? So I consider myself more of a transformational speaker, because you might not even leave my keynotes motivated. You might leave them thinking a bit more, right?
I'm with you, man.
You might leave them thinking, hey, I need to make some adjustments to my life because of what I just heard. Right? And that's my goal, is not to just motivate people. I want to activate people.
Absolutely,
and transform their minds.
And it's probably been a couple years I actually saw that, and I was like, I'm sitting here it was in my book. I started writing about motivation, motivate, and I started saying, it needs to be bigger.
It needs to be bigger.
And so motivation replaced with activation, motivate replaced with activate. And I've been using it ever since, and it just makes so much sense, because in my own life, now, I'm going on this journey, and I'm still going through the journey.
Yeah.
For me to do this show is a big thing for me right now. Emotionally, mentally, it took a lot. Like, don't think I'm not freaked out about this, because I am, Jacob. Will I get will the audience reject the content? Did I have? You said it today on one of your podcasts I heard. You can sit around, wait all day to have the best sound quality, hire the best lighting people, and come in, or just get started. In fact, it was one of your first podcasts, or second. It was just I think it was called Get Started.
Yep.
So, I just love that, and looking at the opportunities that we all have in failure. If you think about that, the opportunity we have in failure is that we grow.
Yeah. Yep. And growth only happens in failure.
Right.
I played football for a while, and weight training, we would push our bodies to failure. Now, the reason you'd push your body to failure is because that's when your muscles grow, but they only grow after you allow them to rest.
Yes.
Right? So in a lot of my keynotes, I talk a lot about the rest and the importance of the rest phase, because we work and work and work and we kill ourselves, right?
Oh, gosh, yeah.
But we never allow ourselves time to rest and reflect. And that's also where you grow.
Right.
That's where the most of the work actually happens, right? Is in the rest.
I love that. And I actually seen that a few of your keynotes you've talked about this, It's impressive because, even I don't know, even in our own journeys, we still struggle with this. And so, if you guys, when you're watching this and any of this information is really hitting home, and and I'm not just saying, oh, these two are awesome, they're dynamic on camera. I'm saying if you're in a tough spot right now in your life and you feel it in your gut and you're scared, I think we're both here to say, you don't be scared. Look at these. Look at us as resources. Reach out in the comments. Message each of us.
Please do.
Because if we can't help you, we know people that we can introduce 100%. You to that would listen. Like I said, I go to therapy every week. I recommend that for everybody. The good, the bad, the ugly, man. Because not only that, it's and having a life coach every week. So having that stuff bubble up and bring in your fears to surface so that they get shattered and you just become this warrior of life. Now you're just on fire. Yeah. You're but attracting greatness around you.
Yes.
So, it's finally taken me quite a while. And it sounded like it took you a while to kind of get to that level. Because I know when you and I first met, you were just kind of really getting into the public speaking side of things.
Yeah. So, from a full-time standpoint, so I've been speaking for the better part of about 7 years. But full-time, I started speaking full-time last January. So January 18th, I was let go from my job at Amazon. I had only been working there for 4.5 months. I was part of the 18,000 people that were laid off. They pretty much let go of everyone that's been there under a year, right, during the tech cuts. And it sucked, but it was one of the best things that could have ever happened because it propelled me into a fearless mindset, right? And that fearless mindset was, Jake, you're an entrepreneur at heart, right? And why not trust yourself, trust God, trust your abilities, trust your talents, and step into your purpose? And my purpose is doing what I do every single day, motivating, empowering, and encouraging other people to fail forward, stepping to their purpose and their goals, and to help guide them to do so, right? Whether it's from stage, whether it's in a private Zoom, whatever it might be, that's what I love to do.
And I love that. And you heard Jacob say a little bit ago about he likes to be referred to as a transformational speaker. Now, if you really think about that and really go heart to heart with that, that's not easy for a lot of people because one, Terry and I talked about this last week about change. Yeah. There's surface level, and then there's deep, man. Your guts are getting ripped apart, and you're learning that. It's like taking apart a car and forgetting how to put it back together again. Yeah. And then one day, through the resources and your research and the people you surround yourself with, you're a new, transformed individual.
Yes.
And change for a lot of people is scary. Mm-hmm. But I think it's scary, and it's been that way for me until I've learned to put myself in. Become more vulnerable and transparent and find the right resources to help me be more aware of the demons in me to get me to want to change. So going through change for you guys, if it's, I'm going to go get a new gym membership and then a month later you don't go. That is technically change, but it's not the transformation that it takes to really become the better version of oneself.
Yes.
Would you-
And I totally agree. You know, any type of change, right? I have people come to me all the time about, you know, Jake, how did you stay sober? How are you staying sober, right? And, you know, you'll hear people say one day at a time, one day at a time. Well, one day at a time isn't enough,
Right.
right? Because the same is true with anyone that wants to start working out, right?
Yeah.
Or anyone that wants to be an entrepreneur. One day at a time isn't enough, right? There has to be that deep-rooted change, because on the surface, I could say, oh, I'm not drinking anymore, I'm fine. And everyone on the surface believes that that's true.
Right.
But inside, I'm like, man, I still want to drink. I'm still having those cravings, right?
Yep.
They call that a dry drunk, right? That you're just buying time until you can do it again. It's the same thing with anything that we're doing. Anytime you're trying to change, you have to make a decision that this is the decision.
So, I mean, if you were to look at our audience today,
Yeah.
and they're you know, millions in the stadium we're in right now, all cheering you on. If you could give one or maybe two pieces of solid advice that could truly take somebody that's in some form of turmoil today, doesn't have to be major life trauma, but fighting some kind of trauma of some sort, and just get them that one step, two steps forward, what would that look like in your mind?
The first thing that you need to realize is that your failures and the things that have happened to you in the past are not your fault. You have to understand that.
So true.
They're not your fault, okay? There are things that happened to me when I was young. There are things that didn't happen for me as I grew up that I used as a crutch to continue to live in the spaces and the places that I knew I shouldn't, right? I used those as a crutch. But one thing I realized is that, number one, it wasn't my fault.
Yeah.
Number two, I don't have to live there forever. And the guilt and the shame that I struggled with for so long, I realized I didn't have to live there forever.
Right.
And once I got to the point to understand, okay, it wasn't my fault, I don't have to live here forever, that's when I was able to be honest with myself about where I was.
Yeah.
Okay? Because for so long, we tend to blame everything else, everyone else, our mom, our dad, our ex, our kids, our grandma, our grandpa, our old boss. We blame everyone else for where we are in our lives. But once we take extreme accountability and say, you know what, I am where I am because of the choices I've made,
Right.
that's when life starts to change. Because once you can be honest with yourself about where you are and what you've been going through, that's when you can actually make the first step. You have to be honest with yourself. And I had to be honest with myself about where I was and the state that I was in 2.5 years ago, right?
Yeah.
Whether it be my business, whether it be my relationships, my friendships, right? Whether it be my relationship with my kids, right?
Yeah.
I had to be honest with myself. And once I was able to do that, and I was able to actually take ownership, no one could take that away from me.
Yeah.
Right? You ever heard the term like share your thoughts, share your fears, because if you do, no one else can use them against you.
Exactly.
Right? And there is a power in that, guys. There is so much power in being able to share your thoughts and your fears so that no one else can use them against you, because now you are in control of your own destiny.
Absolutely. And I would add one piece to that entire thing, and I'm in a 100% agreement with everything. Forgive yourself.
Yes.
Learn how to forgive. So we're all programmed. We were all raised with these, the good, the bad, the ugly of something in life, right?
Yes.
So, but to your point, we still latch on and put the blame.
Yes.
If we can just learn to forgive, not only yourself, but those that we blame,
Yes.
that's where the real transformations, that's the starting point, I think. And so as you start to go in deep into your soul, into the deep, darkest parts of your mind, learn to forgive as step number one. And then you can start processing everything else.
So good. That's so good. It's so true, because a lot of times we carry guilt and shame because ultimately we don't forgive those who wronged us.
Yeah.
But mainly, we don't forgive ourselves, right?
Yeah.
Whether we put ourselves in that situation or whether we hurt other people, we don't forgive ourselves. Meanwhile, the rest of the world has already moved on.
Yeah. And here's what happens, at least from my experience. Here's what happens when you don't forgive yourself, or I don't forgive myself. I'm my worst enemy. I will beat the shit out of myself.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many times I beat myself down and talked myself into how much of a loser I could be.
Yes.
And that's something that, we need to really make sure that we don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
That's where the forgiveness comes from. And then it's okay to fail.
Yes.
Just fail.
Forward.
There you go. Yeah. So I love that. I mean, tell me a little bit about the journey of Jacob here, because back several years ago, I used to do a ton of these type of interviews, but it was in the wine industry. So
Yeah.
the vineyard owners, winemakers, when I owned a wine brand. And the thing that I loved was the getting behind the why of the individual.
Yeah.
Everyone that might know Jacob Brown is now, because you're all over the internet.
Yeah.
But where were you here? And you talk about it in some of your podcasts, but maybe give us the distilled version and ramp it up. Give us the why that you do what you do today.
Why I do what I do today is because there have been points in my life where I felt like a huge failure.
Right.
I felt alone.
Right.
I felt not good enough. And I felt not understood. Right? So everything I do now is to make sure people understand they are good enough.
Right.
They're not alone. They're not a failure. And that they deserve to be at the table. Right?
Yeah.
And, years ago, I got married very young. I got married right during college, 2 weeks before my 5th year at Central Michigan.
Oh, wow.
2 weeks before two-a-days, right?
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yes. And, we were together for 7 years. We had two boys, Caden and Connor. Caden's 17. Connor now is almost 15. They were 5 and 3 when we got divorced in 2012.
Wow.
Ugly divorce, ugly custody battle. It left me pretty damaged from a standpoint of financially to I lived homeless for about 3 months. Okay. And, I bounced from couch to couch. I lived with my buddy for a couple of months. I lived with my other buddy in his attic for 3 weeks. I went to hotels. I had to sleep in my car every now and then. There were just bad moments during that time. All the while, I'm holding down a $100,000 job at an agency. No one knew.
No one knew. Wow.
Right? I'm living out of 2 trash bags during this time, and no one knew. They knew I was going through a divorce and a custody battle, but they didn't know the turmoil I was going through every night that I would go home. Right? And this kind of sparked a little bit of my alcoholism as well. During that phase, that was something that I leaned on, right? But during this phase, I realized that life happens. And even though I felt like such a failure, I wanted to make sure no one else around me, if I could help it, went through this same thing or felt these same feelings, right? So that's where Fail Forward kind of was germinated. Well, as I was going through corporate, working for agencies, working for GM, even working for Amazon, I was realizing the employees that worked for me had fears, doubts, and self-sabotage as well, right? They had that imposter syndrome.
Right.
They had needs and wants. They wanted a sense of purpose. And I started to coach and mentor them even in my leading them for their job. I wanted to understand more about their life because that's what was more important to me. I can hold this job down and have this big title, but if my life is in shambles, none of it matters.
Nope.
Right? Or if I'm doing in a position or a job that I'm not really passionate about, I'm not going to give it my best. It's just, that's the reality, right? So there are even times where I would push employees to other jobs that they were more passionate about outside of the company that they work for me. Because I wanted to make sure that them as the human being were taken care of more so than the position that they were holding at the company I was working for.
Wow. I mean, that's beautiful because when I sit and listen to you, I mean, I'm just like, there's so much of that story that is really my life.
100%.
And it's just like we all go through that. It's just a matter of going through it and getting through it.
Yeah.
So, you have to really, what's the saying? Grow through it?
Grow through it, yeah.
And boy, am I growing.
Yeah.
So I love this. I mean, Jacob, I'm so inspired by you every day.
Thank you.
I mean that from the bottom of my heart and soul. I love seeing you up on stage. I love seeing you with your family, stuff that you share. You give people visibility into the real
Yes.
Mr. Jacob Brown.
Yeah.
And, and that I think is hard to do, because, you want to have this professional persona. But I think in today's world, we've all accepted that we want to know the guy behind it all. Behind that brand,
Yep.
it's a real human with
Yeah.
real feelings. And it's amazing that what you went through to find that you realized that this was your purpose.
Yes.
Because, so many people still struggle with that. They're not even understanding what a purpose is.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. They don't. So, Steve Harvey said says we all have gifts, right? And your gift is something that you can do well,
Right.
with not much effort, right?
Right.
And I believe that all of us have gifts. And most people don't believe that they can make money with their gifts.
Right.
They don't believe that they can live using their gifts. They believe that they have to go to a 9 to 5 and just do that to make money.
Right.
And their gifts are just a side passion or hobby, right? There is a way to operate in your gift, and your gift is usually your purpose.
Yeah.
Right? And once you start finding out what your gifts are, what you're really good at, what you're passionate about, the more you can trust that and lean into that, the
Right.
closer you're going to get to your purpose. Because when you're operating in your purpose, it doesn't take much effort. Now, I didn't say it's not hard. Right?
No, I'm tracking.
It is hard,
I'm
right?
tracking
It
you.
is hard, but it doesn't take much effort to operate in your purpose because you love doing what you're doing. It's not work.
Yeah.
Right? It's not work for me to motivate, encourage people, or sit down with someone and listen to what their issues are and help guide them in the best way that I know how, because that is my purpose. That's my passion.
Yeah.
Right? And that's also a gift that I have in able to be empathetic and relate to people and
Yeah.
understand where they were, because rock bottom is a place that
It's not a city you want to live in.
it's not a city you want to live in, but you learn a lot there.
Yeah.
You definitely learn a lot in rock bottom, and once you're there, you don't want others to experience that either. So you want to try to help them to not experience that.
Yeah. And honestly, that's what this show is supposed to be about. And if you look at the guests, like including yourself, and the accomplishments and the topics that you speak on, imagine better, right?
I love it.
It's something that just resonated with me. So again, you guys, if you really enjoy this type of content, or if you have topics that you would love us to
Yes.
explore, comment below, please. Reach out, and just remember, failure isn't the end; it's fuel.
Yes.
And I want to thank you, my good friend Jacob,
Thank you.
for joining me today.
I
and
appreciate it.
episode 1, you guys. There we go.
Thank you for joining our host, Mark Powers, for another episode of Imagine Better podcast. Next week, Danielle Burnock will be Mark's guest. Get ready for another inspiring conversation.